Congressman, thank you so much. It's always good to have you on. Give us a sense of what you think is really essential for the economy right now to have in this bill.
Well, David, thanks for having me back. I think it's important for us to extend the Paycheck Protection Program, make it more flexible, give parameters that if a business is still terribly suffering from the economic impact of the virus, that they have access to that Paycheck Protection Program. I think that's key. Other things for our small businesses. Secondly, I think we need to find a way that can pass with bipartisan support a resolution on this unemployment compensation issue. $600 flat across the country, which Chuck Schumer proposed back in the spring, has dislocated labor markets in many parts of the country, not on the East or West Coast. So there's got to be some ability to maintain unemployment comp, but get people back to work and remove a discouragement from work.
So on that issue specifically, we had Rob Portman, the senator from Ohio, on last week, and he talked about the 70% as something he thought made sense. The question I have is that something that the government can do? Nothing against the government, but I mean, you had a senior position. You were Deputy Assistant Secretary for Treasury under George Herbert Walker Bush. Is that doable, or at least doable right away? Because we're running up against a deadline. Can the states really make that calculation?
Well, what I think the Senate has talked about, David, is have a smaller flat amount for a couple of months in order to then allow the states to once again tackle reprogramming their computer systems. You know, this is a challenge. Our unemployment compensation system is something left over from the 1970s. I think the pandemic has really uncovered the challenges the states have in designing and having a flexible unemployment compensation program.
What about assistance to the states and local governments? That's something certainly, there's a very large number. I think it's $1 billion the Democrats have in there for it. What do you think the Republicans would want to do for the states?
Well, we had over $1 trillion of direct appropriated money that went to the states, and particularly in education and coronavirus relief in a number of areas, including for the smaller states and bigger cities, $150 billion directly. I think, David, what could really be helpful here is more guidance to spend that money. You know, the National League of Cities has reported that very little of that money has made it to state and local areas. Some states have good ways of spending it, but they're blocked by the 12/31 deadline. So I would propose that we give the states more flexibility on spending the $1 trillion that we've already spent to the states, and that we remove that 12/31 of 20 deadline for spending it.
Congressman, specifically, what about the schools? Because we're coming up against September here and return to schools. A lot of people, for really good reasons, want to get kids back in school in some way, shape, or form. But it's going to take a fair amount of money, isn't it, in public schools across the country to make sure we have the social distancing we'll need?
Well, you heard Secretary Mnuchin over the weekend saying his priorities are our schools and our families. And on the subject of schools, we've sent to Arkansas alone, got about $128 million in K-12 education funding, another $150 million or so for higher ed. I have a bill in Congress to have a grant program, David, that allows school districts to look for gaps. What do they need extra funding for? Hotspots, for broadband access, or the COVID cleaning supplies, or other things to support our teachers and our principals getting kids back safely into classrooms. So I don't have any doubt that we'll look at the money that we've already distributed to the states, and we'll look at the gap that's required to get schools open safely for our kids.
Are you in favor of getting some money to the schools directly, public schools directly, as opposed to essentially vouchers being given to parents? Because there seems to be a move afoot to say, no, well, let's give it to the individuals so they can go to parochial schools, private schools, other things like that. Mm-hmm. Is that muddying two issues here? One is coronavirus and public education, and on the other hand, an ideological dispute that we can debate it one way or the other. Should we really be trying to accomplish that social engineering on the back of this?
Really good question. I do support school choice. Arkansas has an excellent network of public charter schools. We do have open enrollment in those schools, and they're benefiting many, many lower-income families. But at this point, I think we need to make sure that all schools have access to open safely. In a particular district, David, I think districts offer flexibility for parents. I know in Arkansas you can go to school remotely if you feel that's in the best interest of your family. And you have some ability to change schools if you have a school not opening. So there's flexibility at that local level. I think we ought to make sure that we have the maximum flexibility for our governors and our local school boards to do what they need to do to get our kids educated.
And finally, Congressman, give us a sense of timing here. I mean, we've got a deadline of this Friday, basically, for the supplemental unemployment insurance. When do you think Congress can actually get together and agree on something that can be sent to the president for signing?
Well, we need to take action. I've been pushing on this for a couple of months. I'm glad I understand Leader McConnell is going to introduce the Senate version of the bill today. A lot of these issues are well known. We just have to do the hard work of reaching agreement, and I would hope we can get that done before the first few days in August. Not only do we face the unemployment deadline, but we've also extended the PPP program, the Paycheck Protection Program, for funding until August 8th. So we need to get moving, and that's something that Congress always loves to do, David, when there's a deadline.